itself with the statement delivered by the EU. My delegation would like to thank Mr. Nicholas Kumjian for his report, and we commend the significant work carried out by Independent Investigative Mechanism, despite an extremely difficult context. We reiterate our support for the mechanism's mandate and call on Myanmar to fully cooperate with it. The illegal military coup of the 1st of February has plunged the country in a crisis. Luxembourg remains deeply concerned by the widespread human rights violations, in particular cases of arbitrary detention, torture, forced disappearances, extrajudicial killings, and the use of force against peaceful demonstrators. The work of the mechanism remains an essential element for ensuring that all those who have committed serious international crimes are brought to account in order to break the cycle of violence and to protect the population of Myanmar. Without accountability for crimes of the past, justice in the future will remain unattainable. Full cooperation between the Independent Investigative Mechanism and the International Court of Justice and International Criminal Court remains of the essence. Mr. Kumjian, how can countries which still have a diplomatic presence in Myanmar or some kind of influence over the junta best support your efforts? Thank you.
Thank you, and I wish to advise all delegations that the list of speakers is now closed. I now give the floor to Egypt for a video statement.
Thank you. Egypt takes note of the reports of the Independent Investigative Mechanism for Myanmar on the collection of evidence related to the international serious crimes in Myanmar since 2011. We fully condemn the violations against the Rohingya minorities, and we express our concern and call upon the government of Myanmar to put an end to those violations. Egypt supports all efforts at the international and regional level in order to ensure accountability in this affair. It calls upon the IIMM to cooperate and coordinate with the Special Envoy to the Organization of Islamic Cooperation. And we call upon the mechanism to fully abide by the mandate given to it in Human Rights Council Resolution 2/39. We would like to say and reaffirm that this is not a commission of inquiry, and we hope that the mechanism will take this into account in its future report, and thank you.
Thank you, and I give the floor to Australia for a video statement.
Australia thanks the IIMM for its report. We commend the IIMM's important work collecting, preserving and analysing evidence of killings, violence and detentions, including those perpetrated in Rakhine State and following the 1 February coup. The number of deaths, detentions and disappearances continues to rise in Myanmar, as do reports of torture, sexual violence and persecution. We remind the Tatmadaw regime that the international community will hold it to account, including through ongoing robust support to the IIMM. Australia urgently calls on the regime to end the violence, immediately release those arbitrarily detained, including Australian Professor Sean Turnell, and return Myanmar to the path of democracy. Accountability for international crimes is a crucial part of any long-term and durable solution to the crisis in Myanmar. Continued impunity would likely lead to further violence and deter those displaced from returning to their homes. We thank Bangladesh for its continued generosity in hosting Rohingya refugees. Australia has been a long-standing supporter of the IIMM. Australia continues to support its work to hold those responsible for serious international crimes in Myanmar to account. Thank you.
I thank you, and I give the floor to Bangladesh for a video statement.
Was established to collect and preserve evidence of crimes committed in Myanmar, including against the Rohingya, and prepare files for future cases before criminal courts. Currently, several criminal proceedings are underway, including in the ICC and ICJ. We call on the mechanism to maintain close collaboration with the courts and share evidence with them as and when required. Recently, it has been reported that a group of Myanmar nationals seek justice and accountability for the horrific crimes committed against the Rohingya. It might be useful for the mechanism to engage with those people to collect further evidence. We hope that no single perpetrator remains unrecorded. We appreciate that the mechanism pursues its efforts to initiate cooperation with the countries that may be in possession of information relevant to its mandate. However, We deeply regret that Myanmar continues its non-cooperation with the mechanism, the way it did with FFM. We urge Myanmar to fully cooperate with the mechanism to implement its mandate. Lastly, we reiterate our commitment to cooperate with the mechanism for the noble cause of advancing justice for the Rohingya. Undeniably, ensuring accountability and justice would have a significant impact on the repatriation and reintegration of forcibly displaced Rohingya in Myanmar. Thank you.
Thank you. I give the floor to Austria for a video statement.
We thank Mr. Kumjian for the presentation of the mechanism's third annual report and welcome the progress made with regard to the strategic priorities and operational developments to implement the mechanism's mandate. We commend the IAMM for remaining flexible in these challenging times of a global pandemic and fully support its work. In June, the relevant Austrian authorities virtually met with the mechanism to discuss possible cooperation. Austria thanks the IAMM for its careful preliminary analysis of the collected information concerning events since the military coup on 1st of February, which unfortunately seem to confirm concerns that crimes against humanity have likely been committed in the country. Hundreds of civilians have been killed by security forces across Myanmar and thousands of individuals have been arbitrarily detained. We are dismayed about the credible reports and video evidence which indicate that security forces have carried out acts of torture and sexual violence. Those responsible for this widespread and systematic attack on the civilian population need to be brought to justice. We reiterate our call for the military junta to immediately end all acts of violence, to fully respect international law and all human rights, to release immediately and without conditions all those arbitrarily detained in connection with the coup, and to restore power to the elected civilian government. I thank you.
I thank you. I now invite Mr. Kumjian to respond to the questions and comments made at this stage. The floor is yours.
Thank you, Madam President. Several questions dealt with the coup and how that has affected the work of the mechanism. The mechanism always makes it an absolute priority that we stick to what our mandate is, what the mandate given to us by this council. And the coup itself, the issue of the government of Myanmar, who should be in power, whether elections should be held or respecting elections, those are not within the mandate of our mechanism. Our mechanism, however, has the mandate to collect evidence involving serious international crimes. These are generally understood to be genocide, war crimes, and crimes against humanity. Crimes against humanity are many serious crimes such as killings or arbitrary detentions when committed as part of a widespread or systematic attack on a civilian population. We've been carefully monitoring the events and collecting evidence from various sources about these events. And as I detailed in my report, as I talked about in my report, we now believe it is within our mandate to closely collect this evidence because it does appear that crimes against humanity have occurred, and we will continue to look at that. Now, the coup itself, though, has also created difficulties for us, additional work. We received over 200,000 communications from concerned persons in Myanmar, generally inside the country, sending us information or what they believe would be evidence that could be helpful to us, and we've been collecting that and analyzing that. But it strained our resources, but it's also created opportunities because we see now that there's a bit of a different attitude and an appreciation inside the country that impunity will lead to crimes against everyone, that if authorities are allowed to carry out crimes without any possibility of facing criminal accountability, that all will suffer, that all groups will suffer. And due to this, this has created new opportunities where people are coming forward with evidence to share with us. And it's very important that we have the resources and the capabilities, and we're working hard to collect all of this evidence from these various sources. In regards to why the mechanism believes it would be beneficial to expand on its collection of financial information, I would say that in my experience, about 20 years in different international courts and tribunals, what I've seen is that so often crimes are committed because someone is benefiting financially from those crimes. The financing of crimes, if you understand the financial situation, it can lead to evidence about the motive for crimes. It can also lead to evidence about how individuals assisted crimes. Charles Taylor, for example, the former president of Liberia, was convicted in part for crimes in Sierra Leone because of the financial and material assistance he provided to those committing the offenses. Also, the financial information can give you information that could assist various jurisdictions that are looking for ties between crimes or perpetrators and their own territory. When we look at where the financial transactions are taking place, where assets are being held, it can also help us to identify the location of individuals. So we think this will complement and is an important part of our collection of relevant evidence relevant to serious international crimes and violations of international law. Thank you, Madam President.
Thank you. And we will now return to the list of speakers. And I give the floor to the Netherlands for a video statement.
Madam President, the Kingdom of the Netherlands aligns itself with the EU statement. We emphasize the importance of accountability for gross human rights violations and abuses. Since the coup in February in Myanmar, military forces have increased their violent repression of peaceful protests across the country, leaving many citizens dead, wounded, or displaced. We will continue to seek justice for all victims in Myanmar. We take this opportunity to firmly express our strong support for the independent investigative mechanism established by this Council, and we underline the importance of collecting evidence of violations that took place before and after the military seizure of power. We reiterate our call upon the military junta to immediately and unconditionally release all those arbitrarily arrested and detained, and heed to resolution previously adopted by this Council. The report sends a clear message that for the effective functioning of the mechanism, the cooperation with and continued support of the international community is of utmost importance. We encourage the investigative mechanism to seek close cooperation with the ICC and other national and regional investigations that play a role in ensuring accountability in Myanmar. Mr. Kumyan, referencing the challenges mentioned in the report in the investigation of crimes in Myanmar, what can be done to increase cooperation and understanding between the investigative mechanism and international and regional tribunals? Thank you.
Thank you. And I give the floor to the United States of America for a video statement.
Thank you, Madam President. The United States reiterates its strong support for the independent investigative mechanism for Myanmar and commends the IIMM's progress in developing its investigative activities. Preventing the recurrence of atrocities, addressing the needs of victims, and ensuring those responsible are held accountable are essential in achieving the Myanmar people's aspirations for a peaceful, prosperous, and democratic Myanmar that respects human rights. We urge all member states, including Myanmar and its neighbors, to cooperate with and support the IIMM. Credible reports of ongoing human rights violations and abuses in Myanmar underscore the urgency of ensuring accountability and ending the impunity that continues to fuel violence. The United States applauds the IIMM for prioritizing the investigation of crimes involving gender-based violence, including sexual violence. We are alarmed by reports of military and police officials continuing to commit sexual violence, including in detention facilities. The United States remains strongly committed to preventing gender-based violence, including in conflict, promoting accountability for perpetrators, and supporting survivors. What actions can the international community take to further support the work of the IIMM? Thank you.
Thank you. And I give the floor to Turkey on Zoom.
Madam President, we welcome the report of the Independent Investigative Mechanism for Myanmar and thank for the comprehensive briefing. We remain deeply concerned by the rapidly deteriorating security and humanitarian situation in Myanmar in the wake of the military coup that took place on 1st February 2021. We strongly condemn the coup and call for necessary steps to be taken swiftly for a return to democracy and the rule of law. Turkey is in solidarity with the international community to take a firmer stance against the escalating violence by the security forces against peaceful protesters, which has already cost the lives of over 1,000 people, including women and children. Unfortunately, at present, the crisis shows no sign of abating. The release of over 2,000 detainees on 30 June 2021 was a welcome development. However, The recent decision of the military regime to postpone the general elections to August 2023, instead of the initial one-year timeline announced after the coup, has been a major step backwards. We reiterate our earlier calls to the Myanmar authorities to release all arbitrarily detained elected leaders, political personalities, officials, and civilians. At this juncture, it is also worth highlighting that the crisis is most severely impacting the most vulnerable, in particular the Muslim Rohingya minority. Despite the bleak situation at hand, international community, particularly UN, should sustain their efforts to find a lasting solution to the Rohingya crisis, which entails voluntary, safe, dignified, and sustainable return of all Rohingya refugees to their homeland. Turkey will continue to closely monitor the situation in Myanmar. We look forward to continuing our cooperation with the international community on a coherent response to the crisis. I thank you.
Thank you, and I give the floor to Ireland for a video statement.
Ireland aligns with the statement of the European Union and thanks the Independent Investigative Mechanism for its report. Ireland condemns in the strongest terms the military coup in Myanmar and all ongoing violations of human rights. As we have stated repeatedly, ensuring accountability and ending impunity is essential to break the cycle of human rights violations in Myanmar. Ireland strongly supports the mandate of the mechanism to investigate all serious international crimes and violations of international law committed in Myanmar since 2011, including those related to the Rohingya crisis and the military coup. We commend the work of the mechanism to date. Ireland supports the mechanism's prioritisation of sexual and gender-based crimes and violations against children. We express our abhorrence at the evidence collected by the mechanism since the military seized power, including reports of murders, sexual assaults, arbitrary detentions, enforced disappearances, torture and persecution of civilians. We note the preliminary view of the mechanism that the Myanmar security forces have committed serious international crimes since seizing power, which in the context of a widespread and systematic attack on the civilian population amount to crimes against humanity. In light of this, could you provide further details of the mechanism's plans to engage with the authorities of jurisdictions that may potentially use the evidence collected? Thank you.
Thank you, and I give the floor to Malaysia on Zoom.
Malaysia thanks Mr. Komjian for his report presentation and associates itself with the statement of the OIC. Malaysia is pleased to note that the IIMM, despite facing challenges due to the COVID-19 pandemic, made significant progress in implementing its strategic priorities. Malaysia remains concerned with the human rights and humanitarian situation in Myanmar and regrets that the Rakhine State crisis remains unresolved. Malaysia reiterates that accountability process is critical towards finding a just, meaningful and sustainable solution to the plight of the Rohingyas. In this regard, we recognize the mechanism's critical mandate, and through the fulfillment of its mandate, IIMM would facilitate justice and accountability for past serious crimes and contribute to the deterrence of further atrocities in Myanmar. The international community must continue to support the mechanism in pursuing its mandate. Malaysia remains committed to working with all parties, including ASEAN, UN mechanisms, and the OIC to ensure that Myanmar will continue to thrive in its transition into a stable and peaceful democracy and achieve socio-economic development. Before concluding, Malaysia seeks your views on how the IIMM intends to increase dialogue with stakeholders such as intergovernmental organizations, private entities, and regional groups with a view to garnering more support for the mandate. Thank you.